The complacency trap. Again, food for thought, again over here. Newlyweds and old married couples have one thing in common. They should never get too comfortable. And that's what I call the complacency trap. Newlyweds and old married couples have one thing in common. They should never get too comfortable. I was talking to a friend of mine, and this friend of mine was recently married. And he asked me, he said, hey, he said, you've been married for over 13 years now. Does it get easier? And I said, well, I don't know how I should answer that. It may not get easier. In some sense, in some ways, sure, it does get easier because now you're more familiar with the individual that you did not really know in the first couple of years. But then in another way, it gets more challenging because with the passage of time, and I'm 42, with the passage of time, you become physically weaker. You get tired more easily. Your energy levels are lower than they were 14 or 13 years ago when you were in your 20s or 30s. So you are dealing with depleting energy. You're dealing with probably higher levels of stress and so on. And to add to that, you have a child or children who are now placing greater weight on your relationship and are drawing from you and are pulling from you. So gone are the days when you didn't have the added responsibility of parenting. Gone are the days when you could just come home from work and just relax, lie down, and just unwind and relax with either by yourself or with your spouse, because now you have to pour in and you have to recharge by any means necessary to pour into this life that God has entrusted, that the Lord has entrusted you with, which is the children that God has given you, right? And so you can't afford to be tired. You can't afford to be sloppy. You can't afford to be complacent. No matter how your day has gone, you have to find a way to recharge, refresh, and pour into the children that God has entrusted to your care. And so it's not easy. So that's what I told this friend of mine. You think it gets easy, it doesn't. It may actually be getting harder and more challenging, which then presents another question. What do we do? Where does our help come from? And I'm going to come to that in a moment. Some interesting stats again. 10 of the most common reasons for divorce: little or no marriage or premarital education or religious differences, lack of support from family, health problems, domestic violence, drug abuse, substance abuse. The list goes on. Financial problems, getting married too young, too much conflict and arguing, infidelity or extramarital affairs, and number one being the lack of commitment. And so if I say the top 8, this is again from another study from lawyers.com. It goes something like this. 25% would say that the top 8 reasons of divorce, this is again based on studies or responses that lawyers have shared, 25% is due to domestic violence and abuse. 25% is due to domestic violence, abuse. 41% lack of preparation for marriage. Number 6, 44% would say lack of equality in a relationship. 45% would say unrealistic expectations. 46% married too young. 55% infidelity. 56% argue too much. And number 1, 73% lack of commitment. And so here's the question, right? What's the solution? What's the key? What is the secret sauce? What is the magic formula? And really, there really isn't anything that I could say to you right now that cannot start with this, right? And this is God's design, right? God's perfect design. God said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. The two shall become one flesh.